I mean, first of all, honestly, I don't think we're going to edit. Why? Because as you just said, I love being myself, genuine. I don't have anything to hide. I just, and that's kind of part of what I'm, yes, what I am, and what I want to be, towards the world. I don't want to hide. I don't want to say, so please, just, I think everything is, will be like this, because it has to be, right? I mean, the world is changing so quickly now. Just be yourself.
Well, I also feel like when we're honest, people could feel that, and there's such a great connection that happens with honesty. There's such a purity with it, and once we strip ourselves down, which sometimes it's really hard to do, that's when we can really, like I said, connect with each other. In a real special way. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
y- well, do you have any questions before we start, or shall we just dig right in?
I think we can dig right in, but I already have so many things that, I mean, first of all, like, did you suffer as well mental health, to start something? Because it takes one to know one, right? I mean, most of the time. So did you have is that how you got into it, to help people, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I started the idea in 2017 when you probably remember we had a musician, Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. They both lost their lives to their mood disorder, like within a month of each other. And that really hit me hard because I covered, I interviewed Chester Bennington. Anyways, music brings so much joy. And I thought, gosh, they're living this world in pain. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to know that these beautiful musicians are suffering. And I thought of all the musicians, that suffered with depression, anxiety, drug, addictions that took them down. And so I wanted to do something that could create a change. And I had just come out of my own bout of depression and anxiety in 2017, which had happened periodically throughout my life, and I found that it actually had to do with the hormonal changes. But it took a long time to discover what the cause of that was, and also to find my solution. And I could say that I feel very thankful and grateful, for that. I guess the journey, and also finding the life waiting for me on the other side, that I want other people, musicians and the fans, to know that that other side is waiting for them. And it's a beautiful life, a life full of gratitude, appreciation, which I'm sure you understand because you've gone through hardship, right? You've gone through some hardship beyond your mood disorders.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea. Absolutely, it's so many musicians. I mean, I remember with my wife a few years ago, we were having dinner, for work at so house in LA, and then my wife is like, "Look, this is the Cranberry singer, right?" And I was like, and I mean, I'm not really good at that because the way I grew up, I wasn't, but Cranberries was, I love the music,
Right.
and and I think it was Cranberries, right? Because she
Hmm.
basically died like few days after that. And but that day I remember her because there was like two men with her, and she was, I mean, she was a mess. She was really, really a mess. And I felt, yeah, of course, I felt the pain. And I think being a musician, uh, being basically a creative, you feel,
Mm.
you feel a lot, and you're very emotional, and and the world we are in doesn't really support, all these emotions. And once you start going into the kind of business of things, right? I think that's where it really hits you, because we're not made for that. Musicians are made to create and make music, and something that comes out of us, just, yeah, something beautiful. I mean, for me, for my part, something beautiful. I've always, it's like a quest. I feel like a bit like a Indiana Jones of music. I'm looking for this perfect frequency. And it's funny because the way I'm looking for it is actually by, putting myself into a state. And I go into trance every time I make music. Every time, I'm basically on the piano. My brain changes. Everything changes. and he healed. I mean, he saved my life. To be honest with you, like he really, literally saved my life. Because it's funny when, so I was sent this questionnaire, right, about mood disorders, which one I had. And I was reading through it. I was, oh my God, I had this one. Addiction, yes. Like mental health, yes. Depression, yeah. Suicidal, yeah. Pretty much everything, And I laugh about it today, because today I did solve, my issues, but I wasn't sure I was gonna make it, because I almost died, several times, and it was incredibly tough. It was extremely difficult, and especially when you are hypersensitive, because you feel everything, So at some point, you do not understand what these emotions are. Are they from the people you meet and you feel them? Are they as well from yourself and a mirror? So it's kind of everything together. And and it was killing me, seeing poverty was killing me. I couldn't read the news, because otherwise I was getting depressed to an extent. You see what I mean? So it's it's a lot of things together. It's tough.
Yeah, I do believe, I've had musicians on the podcast express similar things, and I've come to realize that a lot of musicians are empaths, that they can actually feel the feeling of other emotions from people, the energy, even like for me, like watching a movie that is violent or there's torture, even though I know that that is fake, that still, I could still feel the pain. I could still feel, in my heart, I could feel the pain, and so I can't watch it. So it's the same thing that you say with news, right? And with people that you meet, you could sense all of these things. So it's almost like a double-edged sword, right? We could be very expressive and happy and like charismatic, but on the other end, if something really hurts us, it could really hurt us, right? And that could be the part that we have to protect and really be conscious of. Because,
100%. Yeah.
right.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, because I barely watch TV. I mean, I never watch TV. And once in a while, to make my wife happy, I'm gonna watch a movie, right? But ever, never, ever, I will watch a horror movie, because, as you said, right, we think it's fake, but it's not, because the emotions are real. And as you say, right, how come we're gonna watch something, and we get into, and it's funny because not a lot of people really talk about it, but I think it's essential to the core of our being. When you watch anything around you, everything will affect you, right? And as you say, if you watch a very dark scene, that's going to affect you. If you watch someone killing someone, that's going to affect you. That's why people can cry, people can be depressed watching a movie. And I will go further. Look at pornography. I think they should be forbidden. They should be illegal. Why? Because it kills people. You've got this kind of fake release of dopamine, and we have it from movies. We have it, from this pornography. We have it so many things. But at the end of the day, our emotions are real, right? So if someone is crying, this is real. I mean, it's most of the time, and that's why I'm very conscious of. I've got 2 babies. And I'm very, very, very careful of the things they watch, because then I think it can create a trauma, right? And that's how you start in your life having all these traumas, linked to things you watch, things you felt, because we are human beings, right? I mean, we feel everything, and some people, I think most people, are not actually conscious that it does affect them. And that's why I never watch movies at night, because at night, what I do personally, I do my breathing and my meditation, and I'm going to do and then maybe read a book, but never a movie, because otherwise it will affect my consciousness, it will affect my dream state. And this is something that I'm because I love lucid dreaming and it makes me happy, right? Because otherwise, if you watch something very dark, then you end up having these panic attacks, and as you say, right, especially more musicians, because yes, it's empathy, right? And I have so much empathy that I feel, the pain of people, but also, I don't know if you've had that, but I think we don't realize sometimes what we are, right? And I paid very close attention to what I was, in order to understand how to heal. And sometimes, just watching someone, you can feel who they are, right? You can
Yes,
feel.
you can.
You see what I mean?
Very subtle things too that you see of expressions on their face, their eyes, their mouth. You know, everything can show you their emotions if they're not able to verbalize. And a lot of, you know, some musicians have a hard time verbalizing versus, let's say, writing music. Music is a language that they feel more comfortable expressing that emotion. And like yourself with your instrumentals, you don't even have to say a word. There are no lyrics, but you could feel exactly, you know, that emotion that you're putting, you know, through your fingertips onto the piano, into the music. And kind of like out into the universe, because I could feel that, how, you know, the music just goes out beyond, you know, beyond you know, just the listener, which is really something very unique. But I do want to go back to what you were talking about with perception, because, you know, it's the same with music, right? Lyrics, melodies, all create a mood that could go out to the listener. So music can be healing, or it can also have a negative effect without us consciously realizing this. But I want to start from the beginning so people know a little about your backstory, because you did, you know, grow up. Your mother was in a cult, and you were, you know, just born, not very old at all, and so you grew up in this atmosphere. What were the first memories that you had of this, you know, living in this cult?
You know, sometimes what trauma does, it kind of not erase, but it puts all these thoughts into a little box in your mind, right? And then you move on. Otherwise, you couldn't survive. And it's funny because I have like kind of my memory wiped from, you know, my childhood. I remember only a very few, but otherwise most of it I don't even remember. I only remember the very dark, or maybe I don't know if the darkest ones, but living in a cult, I mean, the way this cult was operating was, you know, of course, very, very bad. And it made me question, of course, you know, the existence of God, right? And which I think for me was actually a very good thing. But I only realized that much later in life, because there was this guru, and I couldn't do anything, right? I mean, it was just, you know, they would beat me up in the name of God because I had some ego in me, you know, when I was 9 years old, having 40 people around just, you know, beating me up for no reason. And my mother was very lost at that time. So yeah, it wouldn't basically, it's funny because when you talk about it, like when you ask me, starting, you know, of course, bringing memories, and it's yeah, it's a horrible way to grow up, because I didn't have any codes, you know, of life, any boundaries, nothing. I just didn't know what it was. But what I kind of felt was, if God is supposed to be love and you know, and acceptance and compassionate, then there is something really, really fishy, right? Because it was so bad that, you know, they could ask me to be, you know, on a chair for like, you know, sorry, got my son. Hey, mon chouchou, attends, bébé.
Wait, is your daughter or your son?
No,
Your son? How old's your son now? I
that's
saw
my
him.
daughter.
Oh, it's your daughter. Look at her. Look at that cute little smile. My gosh.
And that's my little boy.
Oh my goodness. So adorable.
Sorry. Allez voir maman.
Venez. Allez, venez.
So cute.
Allez, Lily. Lily, papa. Papa, il fait une interview là. Tout à l'heure.
Pardon.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
À tout à l'heure. À tout à l'heure, mes bébés. Au revoir, Noah.
Bye-bye.
Je reviens.
Oh.
All right.
No, so adorable. You know, that brightens my day.
It's, yeah, that's for me the most beautiful thing. And you know what? Them as well. I played music when my wife was pregnant. And it's funny, my daughter is 3 years old, and she can hum the songs I was playing while she was in the belly to the perfection.
Wow.
It's insane. And now what I'm trying to do is basically go into even more scientific evidence, you know, that music can heal scientifically for sure. But anyway, so to go back, yeah, I mean, it was a very, very horrible time. You know, I was not allowed to watch television, to be with friends, you know, to be, you know, I had to be conscious of every movement I was doing. The guru would come and you know, rip me apart, you know, taking me from the hair. I mean, they shaved my head, they shaved all my family's head, you know, to go to school, to break, you know, the ego, to break. I mean, it was absolutely insane. But we had a very old piano that I basically fell in love with. That's how I started, right? I never had any lessons because they didn't want, you know, me to kind of go in the outside world. So I would just, you know, go to that room and play the piano. It was talking to me. That's how I started, right? And it's funny because my music has also, you can hear some rhythm and stuff, and that's because I developed very early an OCD. You know, I was counting, and I still am today, everything all the time to keep sane, I think, you know. And the only time I was not counting was when I was playing, because I was just, you know, going into trance, and that's how piano literally saved my life. You know, that's the only thing I could do that was just heal me. It was feeling so good, right? Just one note and two notes, and then I had all these images, right? So when I was playing, I started having all these images, and that's why I never really wanted to put words on it the way I do it, because that is, you know, I was free of imagining anything I wanted and letting all this, you know, creativity, you know, flow this way. And then they took it away from me, you know, when I was 14 years old, because it was the evil or whatever, you know, stuff they were thinking. It was they sold it because I was playing too much. So
Oh
it
my
was,
gosh.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, they're sick. Those people are sick. Yeah.
Well, that must have been heartbreaking. And I'm
They broke,
sorry.
they broke everything, all the family. You know, I didn't have a family anymore. I left the day of my 18th birthday, and I didn't see my mother and my siblings for almost 15 years. Yeah, and that was horrible.
I'm sorry that you went through that. Um, you know, it's funny how you talk about how um, memories are erased from your mind for survival. I do believe that's true, because you know, you hear about people who have gone through very bad trauma and just start to remember it maybe 10 years later, or, you know, long after. Maybe it starts coming to them, you know, as the brain starts to heal. Um, but you know, you also talked about mental abuse during that time. Were there certain things that they would tell you, or, you know, make you feel? It already sounds like you felt unprotected most of the time. That, you know, punishment could come at any moment. What were some of the things that they were saying to you?
I mean, basically, you know, of course, like being, you know, not worthy, to be, you know, that you're bad, you're bad, you know, that, you know, and that the evil is, you know, is in you, that, you know, basically, yeah. And of course, as a child, you're just like, but hold on, you know. And I was always trying to be, you know, to be my best, and they were like, no, you will find, you know, better than you will, you know, you're basically nothing, right? That's and breaking, of course, you know, families. So I would not be allowed to call my mother mom, you know. I wouldn't, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, it's to break everything, you need to break, you know, to break us, basically. And I mean, they did succeed in a way, because I mean, yeah, we even my siblings today, now they're starting to get better, but it took, you know, it took a long, you know, yeah, very long time. And it's funny because you know, I'm not the only one, right? I mean, on this planet, everybody, you know, is suffering, and that's why we need more love and more compassion because the kids are the future, right? You know, of our species. So I realized that. I was like, I mean, it's, yeah, you know, it's, yeah, I don't even know where to start, because it was part of my, you know, my daily life, and I had to survive. And it's funny because I could have, you know, sometimes survivors, you know, can be horrible people, because they think, well, you know, screw it, I had a bad life, I'm going to do my way. But I didn't. I didn't, because maybe because also I always had experiences as well, right? When I was very young, like especially when I had an out of body and lucid dreams and I saw things that made me really believe there was more. And
well, tell me about that, because I'm really curious. I remember once that I had a lucid dream, whereas I was conscious, but I was in a dream state and I was actually able to control what was in my dream, which of course was very entertaining. I was just in my teens at the time. But how is it that the lucid dreaming, was that a means of survival for you mentally, or was that, how did that come about, and how does that help you?
so it really helped me because so I was like, I can't remember, I think like 6, 7 or something, 6, 7, 8. And kids, you never want to go to bed, right? But it was so horrible that the only times I enjoyed were to be left alone, right? So I would always try and sneak out and go to my piano, and in the evening go to bed. And they wouldn't understand, like, because normally you don't want to go to bed. I'm like, I want to go to bed. And what I was doing, I realized that, I was always, when you're a kid, you make little stories in your mind and then, you fell asleep. But then I realized, oh my God, like I'm making my story and then I go there.
Oh,
As simple as that. Yes. So every night I would basically make up a story, thinking about something and going there. And it was amazing. So I loved, sleeping because I would have all these experiences and go to places and have this, right? And then as they were pushing me, of course, then in my teenage, I lost it, right? And it's funny because then I went all around, right, like a 180 degrees, and around 10 years ago, when I was 30 years old, then I went back into it, and then I started reading about it. I was like, okay, I want to understand how it works. So I read Stephen Laberge, who's the pioneer of lucid dreams, and I went back into it. And it's the most amazing thing that that exists, right? Because you're really fully conscious but fully active. So it's not like because in our dreams most of the time we are spectators of the dream, even though it might be vivid, right? It's a difference between vivid and lucid. Lucid, you can make things happen as you just said, and it's absolutely insane because especially in this pandemic, right? I wouldn't travel, for the last 2 years, no tour, it was quite, and it still is quite a bit, it's a bit tricky, but I would go in the confine of my own mind. And it's amazing, because if you want to go to the beach, you just, focus on the beach, focus on an image or a place that, and with your intent, it really happens, So, of course, for me, I developed also little, I developed little like kind of tools, little aids. So like binaural beats that I make my own binaural beats that really helps. And also my diet, I have, I'm just very healthy. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't, what I mean? And I kind of fast as well in the evening. And it helps me. It helps. I don't know why, but, doing a lot of, you do your own recipe and you learn. And I loved, as I was challenged, in my early life, I have to admit that when I went into the normal life, it didn't really interest me. You know what I mean?
Oh, because you were kind of in this fantasy life of the lucid dreaming. Is that it? Because, lucid dreaming, it sounds like you really can do anything you want to, and like be as creative as you want and almost live in a fantasy world. Do you actually get into it by, I would think you'd have to be in a kind of a sleepy state, but then just start thinking these thoughts and then having the intention that you want to be. What is the process for you to get into a lucid dream?
It's a very good question. I think, the intent is everything, right? But we start now, science is starting as well to come around and say, well, we might live in a virtual reality because when we put our intent, we put our energy, right? And I actually heard this interview of this guy a few days ago in Paris when I was driving. He was saying that we emit, light, right, as a human being. and we could measure it in terms of watts, like 2 watts. And I think he was saying that it was 2 watts per kilogram or something. And I thought that was very fascinating. I was like, hold on a sec. So if you're like 70 kilos, then that's 150 watts that you emit, isn't it? And so many things, right? So
I think that is true. I think because sometimes when we see musicians on stage, you see a different level of light and energy that comes out. I mean, I'm sure you see that also. People might also see that with your live performance. But I do think that is true. We feel that.
We feel, I mean, we are energy, right? I mean, this is the reality. It's funny because there is only one energy people talk about, which is the sexual energy. But we are life energy. But it's true, right? And even that, it's funny how it is a taboo, and at the same time, it's 50% of the internet, and it shouldn't be. So it's a bit. But anyway, so if we go back to lucid dreaming, the most important, first of all, is to have an intent. That's for sure. That's an intent, and to be able to focus. And that's where meditation really helps. Through the day. If you meditate, I meditate twice a day, right? It does help for your brain to be focused. So, as a technique, basically going to bed every night and really focus on your intent to do something. And the second thing is, in the mornings, to write a little journal, basically, of your dreams. And if you don't remember them, that's okay. You just, when you remember, you write it down, and you try and do that every day. And I assure you, in 30 days, you'll have lucid dreams. Like, it really is as simple. But for most people, it is difficult because we do not have any discipline. See what I mean? So it is interesting, right? It's the discipline of doing it.
Well, the purpose of writing it in a journal, I mean, do you get messages during that time that you feel are helpful for your life? Or is it just more like a dream journal, like a diary to keep? What is it, the purpose of putting it on paper?
It's to talk to our subconscious. Because our subconscious, the whole point is trying to make the subconscious conscious, right? And it's funny, I mean, we talk about consciousness, but consciousness now, they say kind of represent the full spectrum of brain waves, right? And we can see that we are in a different state of consciousness when we lucid dream, but we are also in a different state of consciousness when we watch a movie and we start crying, or we are scared. Oh my God, he's gonna kill her. Oh my God, this is happening. So our consciousness evolves and changes all the time, right? So, I think, I mean, I heard in your question, I heard two, but so one would be, do the dreams, help or say something? For sure, absolutely. But that's why I think it's important to have a very good quality of our consciousness, right? And this is part of our daily life, right? So you probably heard, and I'm sure you have, of these people like Bruce Lipton or Joe Dispenza or Eckhart Tolle as well, The Power of Now. All these people are saying the same thing, right? I mean, you are what you feel what you are, you are what you eat. And it's so true, right? I mean, it's taking our lives, for me, I was a depression my whole life. I tried to kill myself many times when I was younger. I tried, drugs, to heal myself. I smoked shitloads of weed, for a couple of years. When I was playing my performances, I even drank the whole bottle of whiskey, and I was deaf on stage, but I was looking at my hands and I knew what I was doing, but I was totally deaf. I ended up at emergencies with the police, taking me. I thought I was going to go to jail. I mean, because I was in pain. I was in such pain that, and I thought, okay, I need to heal. What is going to heal me? Okay, alcohol, parties, whatever, girls, and it was killing me. And at some point I was like, okay, stop. And I stopped everything. And that day I thought I was going to die. And it's funny because actually yoga helped me, but not yoga for like the doctrine, but because it was exercise. My wife was like, at the time she was not my wife and she was going to leave me, which, I wanted her to leave me because when you're hurt, I didn't want to hurt anyone else, right? And I was hurting myself, and that's what I did, and I did that because I had trauma, and because it was so tough, right? And you see what I mean? It's
Yeah. Let me ask you this though, because you have so much of a load that you were carrying with trauma, so many experiences, that I can't even imagine. I understand how, people do try and self-medicate. It's an easy thing to try to grab something that's available. And at the moment, it might make you feel better, but, as you know, it can easily take you down as well. What do you think? I mean, with all of that you were carrying, how were you able to finally release that and let it go so that you could heal that part of your memories, really?
So, as I grew up in a sect where they were talking about God all the time, and the guru, she would destroy everything. She destroyed my family. My mother almost died. Like my stepfather was hitting me. It's, it was just so painful that, of course, it made me doubt. I was like, I mean, come on, God, if God exists, then God doesn't exist, right? I mean, I was like, but my music always, gave me a sense of purpose. I always knew since I was 3 years old, this is what I'm doing, and I'm here for that. Always had this feeling. Like also, I always knew I would have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and I have 2 kids. So I think there is much more, to life for sure. But then all this pain was literally killing me, and that day, after trying, as I said, antidepressant, everything, I tried everything, to heal me, nothing worked. And it's funny because, I started making a living, I was like, oh, finally, because of course we don't talk about this, and for musicians we will never talk about it because no one, but we are human beings, right? We, you have to survive, and I was, I was on the street, right? I mean, 18 years old, I was like, oh God, what do I do now? And believe it or not, but being a white boy playing the piano and being called Jean-Philippe is not a big help at all. I'm not playing victim here, but I'm saying no one gives a shit, and that's fair enough, right? I mean, I think people need more help and stuff. So and I was like, okay, I'm gonna survive. So I had to work in lots of, of course, very difficult, like McDonald's. Actually, McDonald's didn't want me. That was my first interview. They wouldn't even take me. So I felt a bit like a loser, to be honest with you. So working in bars, just and of course, in piano bars or hotels, just trying to play the piano because that's what I knew how to do. And it was funny how you had the people who are called very human. So if they heard beautiful music, they would come. And the other people who were just, oh, he's just a pianist. We don't give a shit because he's not, famous or whatever. It was very interesting to see how people responded. But music saved my life because that's the only thing that kept me kind of, alive. You know what I mean? All this pain was going after, on the piano, and even drunk, even, I was just like going to the piano. And then I realized one day, I mean, yeah, I was basically literally going to die. I lost, so many, pounds. I wouldn't wake up at some point. It was really, really bad. So she pushed me my wife to go to, to do some hot yoga. And, and I stopped in one day. I mean, long story short, yeah, I stopped everything. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to understand how it works. I'm going to read books about the brain. How does the brain work? How does, and the first book I read was a book by Norman Deutsch, which is called The Brain That Changes Itself, that you probably know, right? And I was like, oh, this is amazing. The guy's a scientist, it's a proper scientist, and he explained, look, this is how it works. And then I discovered that we had brainwaves. And I was like, hold on. So I bought an electroencephalograph. Yeah, I bought one, and I was like, okay, I'm going to measure my brainwaves. And I could see the difference when I was playing my music and when I was very depressed. And I was like, okay, how can we go further? And then, as I was doing a lot of yoga, I was basically, not drinking, nothing, right? I was just very, very healthy, vegetarian. I mean, and I didn't want to be trendy or whatever. I was just like, I need to take all the toxin of my body of like, 28 years of my life, right, or something. And I did, and then I had an out of body experience. And when I had this out of body experience, I was like,
and what was that? When you had an out of body experience, what kind of precipitated that?
I think it was because I got rid of fear. I think, the body has a memory, right? I mean, this is now scientific. It has a memory. I had the memory of depression, of everything, and probably the memory of my mother as well, who had a shitty life, right? Because, her mother abandoned her when she was 2 years old. So this explained that, right? I mean, it's always like this. So I think, having lost so many kilos and basically, I was meditating, fasting, doing a lot of yoga. I was just like, getting rid of everything. And I think because I got rid of fear, I just got out of my body. And first I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, I remember. So then I started reading books about out of bodies, and I went to Robert Monroe, which I would highly recommend. Robert Monroe was a CNBC guy, a producer in, I think he was in New York, like in the 70s. And he wrote 3 books, Journeys Out of the Body, and Adventures Out of the Body. I mean, it's really amazing.
Well, what happened? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm really curious. What happened during your out of body experience? What did you experience during that time?
I was literally outside of my body, looking at my body. Yeah, as simple as that.
Yeah, and it just lasted just a short time, and then you went back into your body, or was there any kind of thought during that?
There was a huge comfort, because I was like, when I had this experience, I remembered that I had one when I was very young, right? Quite a few, but one in particular. And I remembered how I got it. And that experience, and you're gonna laugh, but I was a kid, so I didn't know. And and again, I was very interested in in dreams and everything, because it was healing me more than the real life I was living. And one day I tried to pass a ball from my left hand to my right hand, and I was like, okay, I have to meditate. So I did meditate, and then when you meditate, your brain waves slow down, right? And I didn't, of course, pass the ball, from my left or right, but I went outside of my body. And it was my first experience. Yeah, consciously, I was, oh my God, that's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I was just pulled out of it. And it's funny because, I think especially now in 2021, this can be achieved by anyone, right? They are, look online, go on Google, read books, anyone can have out of body experiences, And an amazing guy that I actually met and became friends with, who I think is an amazing person, and he's very underrated because sometimes that's how it works, right? He's called Thomas Campbell, not Joseph Campbell, but Thomas Campbell. And he worked with Robert Monroe. And I read his book as well to understand more, okay, how does it work, right? If I had this experience, I know I'm not the only one, how we can read. So I started reading a lot of books, William Buhlman, Robert Monroe, then My Big Toe from Thomas Campbell, to get the science. And that was very good for me, because after living in a cult and having this weird, a bit weird experiences, I was like, okay, I mean, I'm not going to the spiritual, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm not going to the New Age stuff. I was like, no, this is probably a cult as well. So I had to understand, okay, what is the science behind it? What is the science of dreams? What is the science of meditation? How can I heal, right? And I knew when I had an out of body, I felt amazing. When I had a lucid dream, those lucid dreams, the effect of a lucid dream could last for weeks, You
mean just the high of it, like the joy, or the joy of it?
The joy of it, the joy of being like, oh, I feel good. I have no pain. And that is what I've always been looking for. And that's, you probably know about my music, right? I mean, like, you feel this hope, this peace. Oh, I feel good. But for this, we need to understand first, like, that we have feelings, because life is so fast that we don't understand. Oh, I'm not doing well. I'm not doing well. Why? What is happening? And so you see, by reading the neuroscience, especially neuroscience, and then making links, then I found Bruce Lipton about the biology of belief. And I was like, oh my God, we can change with our intent. We can change ourselves. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take, a few weeks. It doesn't take years, to be honest, but it's going to take a few weeks.
I'm going to practice that for sure. Because I do know that sometimes, like, the high I get from seeing a live show or a live performance can last weeks, that joy just makes life so much easier when things get tough. So, I also know that you put a lot of, you talk about lucidity and you talk about like transcendental meditation and how that kind of goes into your music, maybe even while you're writing it. But, one thing I really need to ask you about is, because you mentioned depression, I'm sure anxiety, but also OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And that could be very crippling. I was wondering, how did that enter your life? I mean, how did that play a part in your life? When was it very bad?
It was very bad when, sometimes when it would be very bad, especially when, you're just counting, and then you become conscious that you're counting and you cannot stop.
It's just like a cycle that keeps going.
Of course. And then doing drugs, and I do count alcohol as a drug, it would be worse. It would be worse. And then I would be almost in the jail of my own mind. And I couldn't live, I couldn't survive. It was too much. And that's why I wanted to stop the game, stop the game. Come on. And then, ending up in emergencies, several times. And no, and that's why at some point in my life, I was like, okay, now I have to take charge. We're not victims. We can do it. I can do it. Some people did it before, I can do it. I'm strong. And I wanted to challenge myself. Okay, I can do this, because I tried antidepressant. I tried everything. And I had like so many therapists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists. I mean, nothing worked. I mean, nothing but, finding actually, meditation, and changing my life, being in charge of my own life, my own destiny.
Well, I know you mentioned this while you were talking a bit about your wife. And it sounds like your wife has experienced when you were at a very low point with your drugs and alcohol, and it's come to the point now where you lead a much healthier life. How was she a catalyst or a partner during that time?
I mean, because I was, because my wife is she's a very special, a very special human being, and she saw that I was basically, dying, and I was. I mean, I literally was dying. It's and I didn't care, because I was too low, and so she tried. She helped me, and at the same time, something that happened that was very big for me was my little sister, who was 10 years, 10 years or younger than me, that I didn't see, since she was 9 years old. And I don't know how she found me on socials, obviously, right? And I think it was on Twitter. She sent me a message saying that she wanted to come and see me in London. And that was very weird, because when she came, I felt like a ball of light, like really a ball of light. And I hated myself, and I was, oh my God, and that and my wife really, really saved me. But I have to say, there is always, a reason, and the reason why I thought, doing my music, because that's the only place where I was, feeling very good, right? Was when I was playing music. But when I was not playing music, I was always depressed, right? As I said to you, my whole life. And I thought, okay, that's because I don't make a living, right? But the day I started making a living and I started to have a bit of success, making, big adverts and concerts and blah, 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 and kind of entering the showbiz world, right? I mean, I realized that it didn't change anything. See what I mean? I realized, well, actually, okay, now I've got my grand piano, I've got, my big flat. And I was like, I still have my depression. I'm still miserable. You see?
Mhm.
And that's where I was like, wow. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. So this is, and I think it's important to state, because sometimes we think, okay, when I have this, I'm happy. When I have that, when I have a car, when I have a house, and actually that's very untrue. It never ends, right? Because we're always looking for something, always, always, always. And I was like, wow, I was very poor, I was miserable, then I got a bit of money, I was miserable. And so the kind of end game for me was when, my wife and my sister, it was the tipping point. And
Well,
yeah.
well, I'm glad you had those people that were supportive of you and that loved you and cared about you. I know that, sometimes even when we're surrounded by people that love us, if we've gone through some tough times like you have, that especially with the kind of mental programming that you must have had, you mentioned something about hating yourself or not, liking yourself at this point of life. How did you find like that self-love? Because that really is, I think, the foundation of kind of opening up your world.
Yeah. Well, through science and then meditation, because understanding that we have brain waves, that we have, we can modulate them. And I was like, okay, how? And then I started again meditating, and I didn't do actually transcendental. I did, the mindfulness meditation, which sometimes can be confusing for most people, because, there's so many ways of meditating, and that's true. But I think the two ways I believe are the easiest to meditate is either transcendental, so you have a mantra, and I know transcendental is a kind of a trademark, but you don't have to pay $1,000, right? Just find a mantra that doesn't mean anything, because you don't want to put an intent into it, and just repeat it, right? That's it. Now, for me, I was just consciously listening, becoming conscious of my breath, right? My breathing. And I started doing it as like literally every single day. And it changed a lot of things, because when you start meditating, the first, I would say, I would say meditation is the door, because then behind the door you can explore consciousness in many, many different ways, right? And that's very true, right? Our intuition increases, our recollection, our memory, and science says that meditation is an amazing tool. Lower inflammation, increases the gray matter in the brain. It helps, like cognitive, like so many, many things, basically, with meditation, purely from a scientific point of view. And that's what I was interested in, because of the cult, I grew in. I was like, I don't want spiritual, like, bullshit. I'm not interested in that, because you guys, showed me that this was not the way. So, looking at science, I was like, oh my God, this is great. Going to meditation. And then through science, through meditation, I had spiritual experiences, again. And then I was like, oh God, so maybe there is something, And then I started finding myself again. And I was like, wow, the world is beautiful. And actually, it's really funny, because I realized that the more challenges we have and that we can go through, the more rewarding it is. And then for me, the ultimate, meditation is to be on a school bus full of kids and being able to focus, because meditation is ultimately focus. And it helps for out of bodies, it helps for lucid dreams, but it also helps for my life today with my kids. It helps me, with, the way I do everything, because my mind is not going to 60 or 70,000 thoughts a day anymore. You know what I mean? I am mindful. And it's funny because I realized as well by doing it a long time, I was okay, how can I increase it? So then I started making my own binaural beats, because you know, binaural beats, they can do in 6 months what Tibetan monks said would take 10 years to achieve, right? So, but you need the right, of course, binaural bits, but it's very, very efficient. Because
can you tell me what that is? Binary bits?
Binaural bits.
I haven't actually. If you could explain that, if you could explain that, I would love that, because I was in the medical field in healthcare for a very long time, and studied a lot of the science, and studied a lot of like the the chemicals in our body and how everything works together. So anyways, if you can explain that to me, that would be great.
So we have brain waves, right? And so we've got okay, basically, binaural beats means that we can create, we can help you getting into this state, right, of consciousness through our brain waves. So right now, you and I, we're talking, we are in beta waves, right? If we have too much, and this is, I think, very, very important to know, if we have too much of this beta waves, then anxiety, depression, and mental health issues. And we can then see them in scans, right, in brain scans. And that's very interesting, because alpha is the state, so it's a bit slower wave than the beta, alpha, right? I think it's between 12 to 15 or something hertz. It's when you're relaxed. And then theta waves is from 4 hertz to 8, right? And this is just prior to sleep, by the way. It's also when you are in the shower and you're like, oh my God, time doesn't exist, right? And this, I think for me, that's one of the most important ones, because they are also what are used in hypnosis, right? So if you go into hypnosis, then the person slowly will start being in theta waves, where you are open to anything coming, you see? So it's kind of fascinating, right? And delta, which is one of the slowest ones, but then you've got epsilon anyway. But the delta is when you sleep, right? But unconscious sleep. So what do those binaural bits? They're gonna put you into a state that you want. So alpha, as we can measure it, like to 12, to 18, then we can create that state by creating a pure tone. We're gonna put it in the left ear. And we say, for example, okay, 100 hertz on the left, and then 115 on the right. And this will create a wave, right, through the corpus callosum, which is in the middle of the brain. And we basically send the signal to the corpus callosum, which is responsible for our brain waves. And after 10, 15, 20 minutes, your brain waves will go into the given ones by the binaural bits.
Okay, so I do understand what you're talking about as far as getting to a state, and you're talking about meditation where your brain is relaxed. I think that's when you can receive messages, right? When it's relaxed. And then when it's clear fear or any kind of emotion that will get in the way. And that way we can receive messages that, maybe we need to hear, or maybe tap into the energy that's out there that maybe can answer the questions that we might be having, or maybe some issues that we're having. Do you find that to be true? Am I on the right track?
I know. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But don't get me wrong. Like, we do it with binaural beats, but for example, if you, I made a track for meditation. I did one for with Calm some time ago, but it's I think we just took it off. But I've got one called Meditation 22, right? Mm-hmm. It does the same thing, because music can help you get into the state, right? Of course. But then we need to just let go, right? Let go by focusing. I do it on the breath, which is the meditation. And then after a few minutes, when you are experienced, and when I say experience, it doesn't take years, right? It's just a few weeks of doing it a bit every day. Because most people are like, oh yeah, I know how to meditate. I'm like, it's like if you tell me you know how to play the piano, but you only had 2 lessons. You don't know how to, you're not a pianist. To be able to be a pianist, then you need a few weeks or a few months. And then when you can play a piece of music, then you're a pianist. It's the same for meditation. We have to understand that, okay, you understand the processes, but then the process needs to be applied, every day. It's a practice, right? It's a muscle. It's the same way. And it is very true that once you know how to meditate in a few weeks, in a few months, then yes, absolutely. Your subconscious, will open basically. So, and it's uncanny. It's amazing because basically you're just in this state and then you're going to hear things, right? I mean, look, even Einstein, right? I think it was the relativity theory that he found by watching a candlelight, because candlelight, he was meditating on a candlelight, right? So it's, of course it works because our subconscious is extremely powerful. And I think it was also Einstein who said, the tip of the iceberg, it was Freud who said the tip of the iceberg is the conscious. And, underneath, we've got the bigger part of the iceberg. And this is the unconscious.
Yeah, I could see how that could be like just that freeing, that sense of freedom that comes with meditation can also be that time where, your brain can heal and also just maybe let go of the heaviness of the past, if you do have heaviness in the past. So I am going to practice that a lot more than I have been. And your music is so wonderful for that. You mentioned Meditation 22, but I know with each song that I've listened to, there's a different emotion, there's a different feeling that I get from each one. And, I also see that how you apply that to, movies, different works that you have outside of your own, piano playing. And because I know you've done work with, different companies and things like that, and all still very beautiful, and, creates this atmosphere. But my gosh, we've talked a lot about mental health, and thank you so much for sharing all of these wonderful solutions that we're going to need to practice with your music. Is there anything else that you would like to say about your music or about mental health?
I mean, we could go on forever, but no,
we
thank
can.
you so much. Yeah, no, and it was very nice talking to you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I mean, I think just, I think life is beautiful, and if we do it ourselves, then I think that's how we change the world, right? I mean, meditation is an extremely powerful tool, and you don't need to be you don't need to be a guru with, you don't need to shave your head and be, cross-legged with, the spine erect and be like, and shanti to meditate. No, science, is really catching up now. And so, because I think a lot of people are like me, with today, sometimes with spirituality can be a bit scary because you can go into weird stuff, which I'm really not interested in. But accessing spirituality through science is great because we have tools, and those tools, you just need to apply them. You try for, let's say, 3 months, and then if it doesn't work, you try another tool. But doing that, it really, really worked for me because, nothing else worked. Being mindful, it changed my entire life. And now I hope I'm a good dad. I can take care of my kids. I can have time for myself. I can have time, because I accept myself now. You see what I mean? I start to love myself. Yeah. Not as an ego thing, but I was like, you know what? I'm okay. I have my flaws, but I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to be more loving, more caring. And just doing that helped me. And then I think it helps other people. So if we all do that, I think we change the world in 2 seconds.
Right. And I do believe, that being mindful, I mean, I know it took me a while to get to that point, but it's really just being conscious about our thoughts, about our actions, about, what we eat, about how we treat other people, just being thoughtful as we go through our life, and also appreciating, right? Being grateful for this conversation and, the things that I've learned from you and, all of this great, really your story, which is a story of survival. And, I thank you for all the good work that you're doing and how your music is out there changing people's lives for the better and healing them, through such a wonderful, enjoyable way. And I can't wait to hear you live. I hope I can see you live one day and hear your beautiful piano playing.
Yeah, we are working on a tour, and I hope that the situation will enable it for sure. I'm supposed to come to the US for a tour, so yeah, hopefully very soon.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to keep track of you, right? RIOPY.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being a check your head superhero. That's anyone who speaks out on mental health, who encourages others to get help, and also provides solutions. So thank you.
Thank you for doing the podcast. Thank you. Lots of love.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much. You did wonderful. And I will keep in touch. I'll let you know once the episode drops. It might be in maybe later January. But we are going to also include like a clip of a single of yours so that people can hear your music. And I feel like, as soon as people listen, they're really going to love it. So we're going to get that out to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you for the kindness. I can feel we're on the same wavelength. So we need more, right?
Hey, absolutely. Thank you so much, and it was wonderful spending time with you.
Same. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.